The scent of old books and freshly baked apple pie was Sarah's most cherished memory of her father, a man whose gentle hands and thoughtful eyes had shaped her world. Even years after his passing, his presence lingered in the sun-drenched corners of their family home, a comforting echo in the silence he'd left behind. Sarah, now a young woman on the cusp of adulthood, carried his legacy not just in her heart, but in the implicit promise of his inheritance, a future he had meticulously planned, a safety net woven with love and foresight. She often found herself wandering through the sprawling garden he had cultivated, tracing the paths he'd walked, feeling a quiet certainty that his dreams for her were still alive, waiting to be realized. Yet, the idyllic image of a united family was often fractured by the stark reality of her mother, Eleanor. Eleanor, a woman of sharp angles and even sharper opinions, had an unwavering, almost fierce devotion to Sarah's older brother. Mark, with his easy charm and a penchant for casual ambition, seemed to effortlessly absorb all of Eleanor's attention, her praise, and her protective gaze. Sarah often felt like a shadow in her own home, her achievements acknowledged with a fleeting nod, her struggles met with a distracted pat on the shoulder. Her father had always been her anchor, the one who saw her, truly saw her, and championed her quiet strength. Without him, the imbalance in the household had grown into a gaping chasm. Were a recurring tableau of this favoritism. Mark would recount his latest, often modest triumphs at work, and Eleanor would beam, offering effusive praise and suggesting ways to further his career. Sarah, who might have spent her day delving into complex coding projects or volunteering at the local shelter, would share her news only to have it met with a polite but distant interest, quickly overshadowed by another anecdote about Mark. "That's nice," dear Eleanor would say, her eyes already drifting back to her son. "But Mark was telling me about a new client today, a very important one." Sarah learned to temper her expectations, to keep her hopes carefully guarded. She knew her father had been a man of fairness, a believer in equal opportunity. He had often spoken of providing for both his children, ensuring their futures were secure. The will, she believed, would reflect that. It had to, but a subtle, persistent unease gnawed at her. She saw the way Eleanor's hand would rest a moment longer on Mark's arm, the way her mother's voice softened, almost imperceptibly, when she spoke to him. She heard the hushed conversations between her mother and Mark, fragments of which sometimes drifted to her ears, talk of family responsibilities, of Mark's needs being greater, of a practical allocation of resources. These whispers, like insidious tendrils, wrapped around her heart, tightening with each passing day as the date for the reading of the will drew closer. The air in the house grew thick with unspoken expectations, a tension that crackled beneath the surface of their strained politeness. Sarah would watch Mark, who seemed to carry himself with an increasing air of entitlement, as if he already knew the outcome. He would talk vaguely of future plans, of investments and opportunities, always with a knowing glance at his mother. Eleanor, meanwhile, became increasingly withdrawn from Sarah, her expressions guarded, her replies clipped. Sarah tried to dismiss her growing apprehension as paranoia, a byproduct of her grief and the lingering sting of paternal loss, but deep down, a colder, more logical part of her recognized the signs. The stage was being set, not for an equitable distribution, but for a decision that would redefine her place in the family forever. The fading echoes of her father's promise were about to confront the harsh reality of her mother's decree, and Sarah braced herself, though she could never have truly prepared for the earthquake that was to come. The day of the will reading dawned with a false promise of sunshine, the kind that mocks an impending storm. Sarah sat in the somber, wood-paneled office of their family attorney, Mr. Henderson, the heavy silence punctuated only by the rustle of papers and the nervous clearing of throats. Across from her, Eleanor sat, her heater face a mask of composed grief, while Mark leaned back, an air of quiet confidence about him that Sarah found increasingly unsettling. Sarah's heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a mixture of hope and dread warring within her. She clutched the armrest of her chair, her knuckles white, her gaze fixed on the attorney's face. Mr. Henderson, a man whose voice usually boomed with legal authority, spoke in hushed, respectful tones, as he began to read her father Issa's last wishes. The initial clauses outlined general provisions, then moved to the distribution of assets. Sarah listened intently, her breath held, waiting for the part that concerned her. A tremor of unease started when her father's beloved antique watch was willed to Mark, followed by the summer cottage, a place of countless childhood memories for both siblings. Still, she reasoned, there was more to come. The bulk of the estate, the investment portfolios, the family business her father had painstakingly built, that was yet to be addressed. Then Eleanor cleared her throat, a sharp, decisive sound that cut through the attorney's measured words. Mr. Henderson paused, looking at Eleanor with a slight frown. As per the provisions outlined in my late husband's will, which designates me as the sole executor, Eleanor stated, her voice clear and unnervingly steady. And following careful consideration of his wishes and the best interests of our family, I have decided to allocate the entirety of the remaining inheritance, including the family business and all financial assets, to Marka. The words hung in the air, cold and heavy, like shards of ice. Sarah's whirl, tilt, the blood drained from her face, leaving her feeling lightheaded, a buzzing in her ears drowning out Mr. Henderson's stammered attempts to clarify. But, Eleanor, he began, the will provides for a discretionary distribution, not an absolute one. While you have considerable latitude, the intent was always for both children. Eleanor cut him off with a dismissive wave of her hand. My husband trusted my judgment. Mr. Henderson, Mark is the son, the one who will carry on the family name and traditions. He is more stable, more suited to manage such responsibilities. Sarah, with her independent spirit, will find her own way. This is what's best. What's best? Sarah's voice, when it finally emerged, was a raw whisper, laced with disbelief and betrayal. She pushed herself up from her chair, her eyes burning into her mother's. You gave everything to Mark? Everything? After Dad promised, her voice cracked. This isn't what Dad wanted. He always said we would both be taken care of. Eleanor's composure finally cracked, replaced by a defensive fury. Don't you dare question my decisions, Sarah. I am your mother. I know what's best for this family. Mark needs this more. He has a family to start, a legacy to uphold. You're always chasing your whims, your head in the clouds. This inheritance would be wasted on you, squandered on some impractical dream. Mark, who had remained silent until now, spoke up, his tones surprisingly soft, almost pitying. Sarah, please. Mom's just being practical. It's a lot of responsibility. You wouldn't want to be burdened with it. His words, meant to soothe, felt like another twist of the knife. Burdened, Sarah choked out, tears finally blurring her vision. This isn't about practicality, is it? This is about you, Mom, always favoring him. This is about erasing me. She felt a primal scream bubbling in her chest, but she swallowed it, replacing it with a cold, hard resolve. The pain of betrayal was a physical ache, searing through her heart, but beneath it, a tiny ember of defiant anger began to glow. She looked from her mother's unyielding face to Mark's feigned concern, and a devastating clarity washed over her. There was nothing left for her here. No love, no fairness, no family. They had made their choice, and in doing so, they had chosen against her. Fine, Sarah said, her voice surprisingly steady now, though it trembled with unshed tears. If this is how it is, then I want nothing from you. Nothing. She turned and walked out of the office, leaving behind the stunned silence, the broken promises, and the shattered pieces of her childhood. She didn't look back, even as the image of a father's loving eyes, now a distant memory, flickered behind her own. She was leaving her home, not by law, but by the bitter decree of rejection, carrying only a burning sense of injustice and a fierce, unyielding promise to herself. She would return, not for what they had denied her, but to show them what they had truly lost. The Greyhound bus hissed to a stop, its massive frame exhaling a sigh of exhaust fumes into the bustling air of the city. Sarah stepped down onto the grimy pavement, the single, worn suitcase in her hand feeling impossibly heavy, a meager repository of her past, and a symbol of her uncertain future. The city, a sprawling, indifferent beast of concrete and glass, loomed around her, a stark contrast to the familiar, comforting quiet of her hometown. She was utterly alone, a solitary figure, swallowed by the anonymous rush of strangers, each one seemingly with a purpose, a destination, a life she could only envy. Her possessions amounted to a few changes of clothes, a well-worn copy of her father's favorite book, and the last $20 she had managed to squirrel away. The initial days were a blur of raw survival. She found herself navigating the labyrinthian streets, her eyes scanning for help-wanted signs, her stomach growling with a hunger that was both physical and existential. The sting of rejection was a constant companion, a dull ache that mingled with the gnawing despair of poverty. Landlords turned her away, their eyes dismissive of her lack of references and the thinness of her wallet. She spent a harrowing night huddled on a park bench, the city's indifferent hum, a lullaby of loneliness, the cold seeping into her bones. The experience solidified something within her, hardening the edges of her resolve. This wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about proving to herself that she could survive, that she was worthy of more than the scraps life had thrown at her. She eventually found a room, a tiny, windowless space above a bustling diner, its walls thin enough to transmit the clatter of dishes and the smell of fried food at all hours. It was a haven, albeit a noisy and expensive one. Favoritism took on every odd job she could find. By day, she cleaned offices, scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans, her hands aching, her back protesting. The monotony was soul-crushing, but she pushed through, fueled by the memory of her mother's dismissive words, Mark's condescending pity. At night, she waited tables at a dimly lit dive bar, enduring the lewd comments and the endless demands of intoxicated patrons. She learned to plaster a polite smile on her face, even as her spirit screamed in exhaustion, her feet throbbing. Each setback became fuel for the fire that burned within her. The humiliation of being lectured by a patron about a spilled drink, the sting of being paid less than her male counterparts for the same strenuous work, the gnawing anxiety of making rent, these experiences didn't break her. They forged her. She saw other struggling individuals around her, some succumbing to despair, others finding solace in fleeting distractions. But Sarah had a different kind of drive. Her ambition wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming her narrative, about proving to herself, and eventually to them, that her independent spirit was not a flaw, but her greatest strength. In the stolen moments between shifts, she would sit hunched over a tattered notebook in her tiny room, sketching out ideas, jotting down observations, her mind always worry. She devoured books from the local library on business, economics, and, increasingly, technology. The world of coding and software, which her father had gently encouraged her to explore, now seemed like a distant, shining beacon. It was a world of logic, creation, and limitless possibility, a stark contrast to the chaotic, often unfair reality she inhabited. She knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within her, that this relentless grind, this raw struggle, was merely a crucible. She was being tested, refined, and every ache, every tear, every moment of despair was simply hardening her resolve, sharpening her focus. The weight of that suitcase, once a symbol of her destitution, became a metaphor for the burden of her past, a burden she was determined to transform into the wings of her future. She was not just surviving, she was building, brick by painful brick, the foundation of her return. The relentless rhythm of survival continued, but a subtle shift began to occur within Sarah. The sheer grit that had propelled her through countless menial jobs now sought a more intellectual outlet. During her few precious hours of downtime, often late at night after a double shift, she would haunt the city's public library. It was there, amidst the towering shelves and hushed whispers, that she rediscovered a latent passion for technology. Her father had once gifted her a basic coding kit, a forgotten curiosity in the chaos of her youth. Now, fueled by an insatiable hunger for knowledge and a desperate need for a way out, she devoured every book she could find on programming, software development, and the burgeoning world of startups. She started small, her learning curves steep and unforgiving. With the last of her savings, she purchased an ancient, clunky laptop from a pawn shop, its screen flickering erratically. It was slow, temperamental, but it was her portal. She taught herself to code, line by painstaking line, often debugging 4 hours with a cup of stale coffee and the distant rumble of city traffic as her only companions. Her initial attempts were crude, often failing spectacularly, but each failure was a lesson. Each bug fixed a small victory. She began taking on minuscule freelance gigs, online data entry, simple website tweaks, earning pennies, but gaining invaluable experience. One frigid winter evening, while working her cleaning job at a tech incubator, Sarah overheard a conversation about a local hackathon. It was a long shot, a crazy idea, but something sparked within her. She spent every waking moment outside of her jobs preparing, fueled by sheer adrenaline and an almost desperate hope. Her project was simple, a user-friendly app designed to help small businesses manage their inventory more efficiently. Inspired by the chaotic stockrooms she cleaned, she poured her heart and soul into it, sacrificing sleep and what little social interaction she had. Her peers, mostly young, well-funded university students, initially regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism, an outsider in her worn clothes and weary eyes. She didn't win the top prize of the hackathon, but her presentation, though rough around the edges, showcased an intuitive understanding of a real-world problem and a tenacity that caught the eye of one of the judges, an older, seasoned software engineer named David Chun. He approached her afterward, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Your code needs refinement," he said, his voice gentle, "but your idea and your drive, that disinherited. Sarah, you have a knack for seeing solutions where others only see problems." He offered her a part-time internship at his small, struggling software consultancy, a chance to learn and grow, paid in experience rather than a substantial salary. It was a lifeline. This was her first meaningful connection, a tiny crack in the wall of her solitude. David became her mentor, his patient guidance and quiet belief in her capabilities a balm to her wounded spirit. He taught her not just about coding, but about the business of technology, about pitching ideas, and about the relentless pursuit of innovation. She absorbed everything, like a sponge starved for water. In the evenings, after her internship and her remaining odd jobs, she would work on refining her inventory app. Now, with David's feedback, she faced skepticism from others, even from some of David's colleagues, who saw her as an unconventional hire. But she ignored it, her focus unwavering. Her first breakthrough came when a local mom-and-pop hardware store, desperate for a cheaper solution, agreed to try her app. It was clunky, it had bugs, but it worked. It streamlined their operations, saved them time. And for Sarah, it was a validation, a tangible proof of concept. This wasn't just a small success. It was the planting of the first seed. The app, though humble, proved her intuition, her ability to translate a real need into a technological solution. It was the first spark of her future empire, a tiny flicker of hope that promised to ignite into a roaring flame. The days of merely surviving were slowly giving way to the thrill of creating, of building something from nothing, a testament to her own ingenuity, forged from the scraps of her past. Sarah, no longer just a cleaner or a waitress, was becoming a technologist, a builder, a visionary, one arduous, exhilarating step at a time. Years dissolved into a relentless blur of code, caffeine, and ambition. Sarah's small inventory app, born from the humble needs of a hardware store, had transformed under David Chun's mentorship, and later, as his business partner, she had refined it, expanded its capabilities, and rebranded it. The name she chose, Phoenix Tech, was no accident. It was a defiant declaration, a promise whispered to herself in the quiet hours of the night. she would rise from the ashes of her past, stronger and more brilliant than before. The early days of Phoenix Tech were a grueling marathon. Sarah and David worked out of a cramped, rented office, fueled by cheap takeout and an unshakable belief in their product. Sarah, with her innate understanding of user needs and her relentless drive, product development. David, with his seasoned experience, handled the operational complexities. They faced countless rejections, investor meetings ending in polite but firm no's, and moments of crushing doubt. There were competitors with more funding, more connections, but none possessed Sarah's fierce determination or her ability to innovate with such lean resources. She learned to pivot quickly, to listen to customer feedback, and to transform obstacles into opportunities. One pivotal moment came during a major tech conference. Sarah, armed with a polished demo and a compelling vision, managed to secure a last-minute slot to pitch Phoenix Tech. Her presentation, raw with passion and conviction, captivated a venture capitalist who had almost left the event early. He saw not just a promising product, but a force of nature in Sarah. That investment was the turning point, a validation that injected Phoenix Tech with the capital it desperately needed to scale. It allowed them to hire a small, dedicated team to expand their marketing efforts and to accelerate product development. Montages of this period would flash like lightning. Late-night coding sessions, whiteboards covered in complex algorithms, heated but productive debates with David, triumphant product launches, the exhilaration of securing a major client, the exhaustion of constant travel. Sarah became known for her shrewd strategic decisions, her uncanny ability to anticipate market trends, and her unwavering commitment to her vision. She outmaneuvered competitors, not through cutthroat tactics, but through superior technology, unparalleled customer service, and a relentless pursuit of efficiency. Phoenix Tech became synonymous with innovative, user-friendly business solutions, first in inventory management, then expanding into other areas like supply chain optimization and data analytics. The company grew exponentially. One afternoon, Sarah sat in her now spacious, modern office, a panoramic view of the city stretching out before her. David, ever the calm presence, walked in with a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. "Sarah," he said, a wide smile on his face, "I just got the quarterly report. We've officially crossed the threshold. Phoenix Tech just hit its first $1 million in net profit. And that's just the beginning." Sarah stared at the numbers on the screen, a wave of profound emotion washing over her. It wasn't just a number. It was a testament to every sleepless night, every rejection, every sacrifice. It was the quiet, defiant roar of the phoenix finally rising. But even in that moment of triumph, a bittersweet taste lingered. The first $1 million wasn't just a financial milestone. It was a concrete step towards the promise she had made to herself. It solidified her path, not just to immense wealth, but to the recognition that had once been denied her. She had built this, brick by painful brick, from the ground up, with nothing but her own ingenuity and an unyielding spirit. This was her inheritance, forehead in fire. And it was far more valuable than anything her mother could have given or withheld. The journey was far from over, but the path to a fortune, a legacy, and a future entirely her own was now undeniably set. Years cascaded by, each one adding another layer of achievement to Sarah's burgeoning empire. Phoenix Tech had soared beyond all expectations, transforming from a promising startup into a globally recognized tech giant. Sarah, once a struggling outcast, was now a titan of industry, her name synonymous with innovation and disruption. Forbes profiles heralded her as a self-made billionaire, a visionary leader who had redefined what was possible in the tech world. She commanded respect in boardrooms across continents, her insights sought after by world leaders and industry men. Her life was a dazzling tapestry of private jets, sprawling penthouses overlooking iconic cityscapes, and an endless stream of awards and accolades. She had achieved every material aspiration and 10 some. Her closet was filled with designer clothes she rarely wore. Her garage housed luxury cars she seldom drove. She had houses in exclusive enclaves, each one more opulent than the last, yet none felt truly like home. She had the power to make or break companies with a single investment, to shape markets with a new product launch. She was, by every external measure, an unparalleled success, a living embodiment of the American dream. But beneath the glittering surface of her gilded existence, a persistent, chilling emptiness lingered. The vastness of her wealth often felt like a golden cage, enclosing her in a solitude that even her bustling professional life couldn't fill. She often found herself staring out from the panoramic windows of her penthouse, the city lights twinkling like distant, unfeeling stars, a profound sense of isolation settling upon her. She had built an empire, but at what cost? Relationships had withered under the relentless demands of her ambition. Friends, colleagues, even David, her steadfast mentor, sometimes seemed to exist behind a pane of glass, their connection filtered by the immense chasm of her success. She reflected on the sacrifices, the friendships uncultivated, the simple joys forgone, the personal life she had consciously, or perhaps unconsciously, put on hold. She had poured every ounce of her being into Phoenix Tech, transforming her pain into purpose, her betrayal into fuel and will. The success was undeniably sweet, a vindication of her worth. She realized that material wealth hadn't fully healed the old wounds. The memory of her father's loving eyes, the sting of her mother's rejection, and Mark's casual cruelty still echoed in the quiet corners of her mind, like faint, persistent ghosts. The material abundance was a magnificent shield, but it couldn't mend a broken heart. One evening, after a particularly draining board meeting where she had effortlessly navigated a complex acquisition, Sarah found herself alone, sipping lukewarm tea in her cavernous living room. She picked up a framed photo of her father, his smile gentle, his gaze full of pride. A wave of longing washed over her, not for his money, but for his unconditional love, for the simple comfort of his presence. It was then, in that moment of profound stillness and quiet introspection, that the idea of confronting her past resurfaced with renewed urgency. The need for closure, for a genuine reckoning, was no longer a vague whisper, but a compelling roar within her. She realized that the true victory wouldn't be measured in billions, but in the peace she found within herself. She had proven her worth to the world, but she still needed to find a way to reconcile with the ghost of the girl she once was, the girl who had been cast out. The thought of returning to her hometown, to the very place where her world had shattered, once filled her with dread. Now, it was a pilgrimage, a necessary journey. She wasn't seeking revenge. Not anymore. She was seeking an end to the lingering ache, a final chapter to a story that had defined her for too long. The billionaire, formidable and unyielding, was ready to shed her golden cage and face the shadows of her past, not as a victim, but as a sovereign force. The decision made, Sarah moved with the surgical precision and strategic foresight that had built her empire. This was no impulsive whim. It was a meticulously planned operation, a homecoming orchestrated with the same care she'd apply to a multi-billion-dollar acquisition. She needed to understand the landscape, to observe, to prepare for a confrontation that would be far more emotionally complex than any corporate negotiation. The first step was discretion. She acquired a discreet, modest property on the outskirts of her old hometown under an assumed name, a quiet base from which to observe and plan. It was a far cry from her sprawling penthouses, a deliberate choice to ground herself, to shed the trappings of her current life and reconnect with the simpler, rawer emotions of her past. Driving into the familiar streets, the old town seemed both smaller and larger than she remembered. Every corner held a memory, every tree a ghost. The quaint Main Street, the old library where she'd first delved into the world of code, the park where her father had taught her to ride a bike, they were all still there, preserved in amber, yet viewed through the new lens of her experiences. She saw familiar faces, older, weathered by time, and wondered if any of them would recognize the girl who had vanished without a trace, now cloaked in an aura of quiet power. Her first true pilgrimage was to the old cemetery, a peaceful expanse of green beneath ancient oaks. She walked slowly, her heart heavy, until she found the familiar granite headstone Robert Spencer, beloved husband and father. She knelt, her fingers tracing the chiseled letters, a silent conversation unfolding in the stillness. "I did it, Dad," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I built something, more than you could have ever imagined, and I did it without their help. Because of them," tears welled in her eyes, not of sadness, but of a profound, complex mixture of grief, triumph, and an unyielding resolve. This was for him, in part, a testament to the values he had instilled, the belief he had always had in her. She was no longer the vulnerable girl who had left in tears, but a powerful woman, forged in the fires of adversity, standing on her own terms. For weeks, Sarah moved through the town like a phantom. Observing, she frequented local cafes, listening to snippets of conversation, piecing together the mundane fabric of lives she had once been a part of. She learned that Mark, predictably, had taken over the family business, but it hadn't thrived under his leadership. It had stagnated, losing its competitive edge, a shadow of the vibrant enterprise her father had built. He lived a comfortable, albeit unremarkable, life, often seen at the local golf club. His easy charm now laced with a hint of complacency, a faint bitterness about missed opportunities. Eleanor, her mother, seemed largely unchanged, still presiding over her social circles. Her face etched with the faint lines of time, but her demeanor still radiating a quiet, self-satisfied authority. Sarah noticed the subtle signs of decline in the family home: a peeling paint job, an overgrown section of the garden, small details that spoke volumes about Mark's stewardship and Eleanor's priorities. The observations solidified her purpose. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, about holding a mirror up to the choices they had made and the consequences they had wrought. She had come to seek closure, to confront the wound that had festered for so long, and to finally articulate the pain of their betrayal, not with anger, but with the quiet power of her undeniable success. She was ready. The billionaire had arrived, disguised not by a change of clothes, but by the quiet confidence of a woman who had conquered her world and was now prepared to face the one that had rejected her. The stage was set for the reckoning, and Sarah knew, with every fiber of her being, that 'tis time she would control the narrative. The carefully crafted pretext for the dinner was a charity event, a philanthropic initiative Sarah had subtly sponsored in her hometown, under the guise of an anonymous benefactor. Eleanor, ever eager to be seen in the right circles, had been delighted by the invitation, unaware of the puppet master pulling the strings. Mark, too, accepted, likely hoping to network with the important people he assumed would be present. Sarah arrived at the elegant, privately booked restaurant precisely on time, her appearance carefully chosen, a sophisticated understated dress that hinted at wealth without screaming it, her demeanor poised and radiating quiet authority. She was introduced to her mother and brother by a mutual acquaintance, feigning a polite, distant interest. "Eleanor, Mark, allow me to introduce Ms. Spencer. She's visiting from out of town and has taken a keen interest in our local initiatives." Eleanor offered a curt nod, Mark a fleeting, almost bored smile. Neither recognized her. Throughout the initial pleasantries, Sarah observed them, a detached scientist studying specimens. Mark, now in his late 40s, had grown heavier, his once charming smile now a practiced, somewhat tired effect. He spoke of the family business with a vague air of importance, glossing over its stagnation, focusing instead on past glories. He seemed complacent, entitled, still riding the coattails of an inheritance he had done little to grow. Eleanor, her hair now streaks of silver, still held herself with an air of matriarchal pride, but Sarah noticed the subtle defensiveness in her eyes when conversation veered towards the town's economic challenges. Her mother's focus remained narrowly on appearances, on maintaining a facade of prosperity that, to Sarah, felt increasingly fragile. The tension at the table, though outwardly polite, was a palpable undercurrent for Sarah. Every forced laugh, every dismissive glance from Eleanor, every self-congratulatory remark from Mark, fueled a cold, quiet fire within her. She listened to them talk about their lives, their small triumphs, their subtle complaints, and felt a profound disconnect. They were living in a different reality, one where their choices had gone largely unquestioned, their privilege unchecked. Sarah offered only non-committal responses, her eyes missing nothing, her mind cataloguing every detail. Then, at a pivotal moment, after the main course had been cleared and the conversation had drifted to future investments in the town, Sarah decided it was time. She leaned forward slightly, her voice calm, clear, and resonant, drawing everyone's attention. "Actually," she began, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips, "I have been considering a significant investment in this community myself, not just in charity, but in revitalizing key sectors, perhaps even acquiring some struggling local businesses to integrate them into a larger, more innovative framework." Her gaze swept over Eleanor and Mark, who now looked at her with a flicker of genuine interest, their greed momentarily overcoming their indifference. "Indeed," Mark said, his eyes widening. "And what sort of businesses are you looking at, Miss Spencer?" "We have a local manufacturing firm, a family business, that might be open to Sarah Cuddamore," her voice still gentle but with an undeniable edge of authority. "I'm well aware of your family business, Mark. In fact, I've been following its trajectory for quite some time. It's an interesting case study in unrealized potential." She paused, letting her words hang in the air, watching their faces. Eleanor's eyes narrowed, a flicker of recognition, or perhaps just suspicion, beginning to stir. Mark, however, was still caught in the lure of potential profit. "My name," Sarah continued, her voice dropping to a lower, more intimate tone, yet resonating through the hushed restaurant, "is Sarah Spencer. And Phoenix Tech, the company you might have heard of, the one valued at over $50 billion, is mine." The words landed like a physical blow. The color drained from Eleanor's face, her composure shattering. Mark's fork clattered against his plate, his jaw dropping in disbelief. The carefully constructed, polite facade of the dinner party disintegrated, replaced by a suffocating silence. Sarah watched their reactions, a quiet, almost melancholic satisfaction blooming within her. The weight of her achievement, the staggering reality of her success, settled upon them, undeniable and crushing. The debt, she realized, was finally being repaid, not in money, but in the stark, unvarnished truth of who she had become. The silence that followed Sarah's revelation was deafening, a vacuum in which only the frantic pounding of Eleanor and Mark's hearts could be heard. Eleanor's face, usually a canvas of carefully controlled emotion, contorted with a mixture of disbelief, horror, and a dawning, terrible realization. Mark, initially stunned, quickly transitioned to a raw blend of envy and fear, his eyes darting between Sarah and his mother, as if seeking an explanation for this impossible reality. The other diners, sensing the sudden shift in atmosphere, discreetly averted their gazes, leaving the family isolated in their private earthquake. "Sarah," Eleanor finally stammered, her voice thin and reedy, almost unrecognizable. "But how? What are you talking about? Phoenix Tech? That's impossible." She clutched the edge of the table, as if fearing it might give way beneath her. Her mind, racing, desperately sought to reconcile the formidable woman before her, the broken girl she had cast out. The cognitive dissonance was immense, threatening to shatter her carefully constructed worldview. Mark, recovering slightly, managed a strained, disbelieving laugh. "Phoenix Tech? Yo, that's a joke, right? Sarah, you're playing some kind of elaborate prank." His eyes, however, betrayed his fear, scanning her expensive, understated attire, the quiet confidence in her posture, the unyielding strength in her gaze. This was no joke. Tease was real. Sarah, calm and collected, met their gazes without flinching. Her voice, though soft, carried an undeniable authority, each word a measured blow. "No, Mark, no joke. Phoenix Tech is very real, and it is mine. Every single share, every innovation, every billion. It all started from nothing. From the very moment I walked out of that lawyer's office with nothing but a suitcase and a burning sense of injustice." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in, watching the color drain further from her mother's face. Eleanor, regaining a sliver of her old defensiveness, launched into a desperate attempt at justification. "But I did it for your own good, Sarah. You were always so impractical, so easily swayed by whims." Mark was the sensible one, the one who would carry on the family name. "It was my duty to ensure the inheritance was managed responsibly." Her voice rose, becoming shrill, her hands gesticulating wildly. "Your father trusted me. I made the right decision." "The right decision, Sarah isi." Sarah isi. Voice was devoid of anger, replaced by a chilling clarity. "The right decision. For whom, mother? For Mark, who squandered the opportunity, or for you, to feed your favoritism and your distorted sense of duty? You stripped me of my father's legacy, of his trust, of my very place in this family. You told me I would squander it, that I was incapable." Her gaze hardened, but her voice remained steady. "But you were wrong. Your betrayal, your rejection, didn't break me. It forged me. It was the fire that purified my resolve, the catalyst that forced me to build my own legacy, one far grander and more resilient than anything you could have ever given or taken away." Mark, stunned into silence, looked at his sister with a mixture of awe and profound shame. The family business, which he had allowed to languish, suddenly felt like a pathetic toy in comparison to the empire Sarah had built. His easy complacency had been shattered, replaced by the stark reality of his mediocrity. He saw the years had wasted, the opportunities he had squandered, all while his younger sister, cast out and dismissed, had quietly conquered the world. "I didn't come back for your money," Sarah continued, her voice resonating with a quiet power. "I came back for the truth, to confront the reality of your choices, and to show you the consequences. You sought to diminish me, to erase me. Instead, you fueled my rise. The inheritance you denied me became the crucible in which my true wealth was forged. My resilience, my intellect, my unyielding will. This," she gestured around the elegant restaurant, "to the life she now commanded, is not retribution. It is merely the undeniable evidence of what you sacrificed. You lost a daughter, a sister, a potential partner in success, all for a misguided sense of duty and a preference for mediocrity. Look at what you chose. Look at what you cast aside." The weight of her words settled upon them, a crushing, undeniable truth that echoed in the silence, leaving no room for denial or escape. The aftermath of Sarah's revelation was a maelstrom of raw, untamed emotions. Eleanor, her face ashen, stumbled over her words, her once unshakable composure utterly fractured. The carefully constructed justifications she had clung to for years crumbled under the weight of Sarah's undeniable success. She saw the formidable woman before her, a titan of industry, and the image of the impractical girl she had dismissed shattered into 1,000 pieces. Guilt, sharp and agonizing, pierced through her, mingled with a profound sense of regret for what she had done, for what she had lost. Her eyes, usually so critical, now swam with unshed tears, finally confronting the depth of her colossal mistake. "Sarah, I didn't know," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a pathetic plea for understanding that came years too late. "I truly thought I was doing what was best for everyone." Mark, meanwhile, sat slumped in his chair, his face a mask of disbelief and envy. The casual arrogance he had worn for so long had evaporated, replaced by a bitter cocktail of shame and resentment. He saw his own life, comfortable but stagnant, laid bare against the dazzling backdrop of Sarah's empire. The inheritance he had received, once a source of quiet pride, now felt like a paltry handout, a symbol of his own complacency. He grappled with the realization that his sister, the one he had looked down upon, had not only survived without their help, but had utterly eclipsed him. The disparity between his life and Sarah's was a gaping chasm, and he saw, with a clarity that stung, How much his own inaction and reliance on inherited privilege had cost him, he muttered something inaudible. Perhaps an apology. Perhaps a curse, unable to meet Sarah's gaze. Sarah observed their reactions. Her own emotions, a complex tapestry. There was a quiet satisfaction, a deep-seated vindication that hummed beneath her skin. She had done it. She had proven them wrong, not with anger or aggression, but with the undeniable, irrefutable truth of her achievement. But beneath the satisfaction, there was also a profound sadness, a lingering ache for the family she had never truly had. The sight of her mother's brokenness, Mark's shame, didn't bring her the fierce joy of revenge she might once have imagined. Instead, it brought a weary sense of closure, the slow, agonizing process of an old wound finally beginning to scar over. She looked at her mother, then at Mark, her gaze steady and unwavering. "You both made your choices," Sarah said, her voice softer now, devoid of the earlier edge, but still firm. "And I made mine. I didn't ask for your help then, and I don't need it now. What you took from me was not just money, it was a piece of my sense of belonging, of my childhood. But what you gave me, inadvertently, was far more valuable. The fire to build my own world, on my own terms." She paused, taking a deep, fortifying breath. "I won't pretend that the past doesn't hurt. It does. But the girl you betrayed, the girl you cast out, she no longer exists. I am not that girl, and you are no longer the arbiters of my worth." A fragile moment of tentative dialogue hung in the air. Eleanor, tears streaming down her face, reached a trembling hand across the table. A silent, desperate plea. Sarah looked at the hand, then back at her mother's tear-streaked face. The urge to pull away was strong, but so was a deeper, more profound understanding. Forgiveness wasn't about forgetting, or even about reconciliation in the traditional sense. It was about releasing herself from the burden of their actions, from the expectation of their approval. She didn't take her mother's hand. Instead, she offered a small, sad smile, a gesture of distant acknowledgement, not absolution. "This conversation," Sarah stated, her voice resonating with finality, "is not about me seeking anything from you. It's about me finding my own peace. And I have the chapter of my life where your choices defined me is now closed." She pushed her chair back, a quiet dignity in her movements. "I wish you both well, but my path is my own now, forged far beyond the confines of this family and far beyond the shadow of any inheritance." With that, Sarah rose, a powerful woman, finally free. She turned and walked away from the table, leaving behind the echoes of betrayal, the shattered illusions, and the faint, almost imperceptible whispers of a forgiveness that had been found, not for them, but for herself. The morning after the dinner, a profound sense of lightness settled over Sarah. It wasn't the euphoria of revenge, but the quiet, deep peace of closure. She stood by the window of the modest home she had rented, watching the sunrise paint the familiar landscape in hues of gold and rose. The air, crisp and cool, felt different, cleaner. The heavy burden she had carried for so long, the ghost of betrayal that had shadowed her every triumph, had finally lifted. She understood, with absolute clarity, that her true inheritance was not the money her father had left behind, nor the billions she had amassed. It was the resilience forged in adversity, the strength honed by rejection, the unwavering belief in herself that had been born from their dismissal. She no longer needed their apology, their recognition, or their love to validate her existence. She had built her own validation, brick by painstaking brick, from the ashes of their neglect. The success of Phoenix Tech, her global empire, was merely an external manifestation of the inner strength and character she had cultivated. The material wealth was a tool, a testament, but the true treasure lay within her, in the unyielding spirit that had refused to break. Her departure from her hometown was different this time. There were no tears, no desperate glances back. She drove away in silence, not in defeat or seeking approval, but in quiet triumph. The road ahead felt open, limitless, unburdened by the past. The wound had finally healed, leaving a scar that served not as a reminder of pain, but as a testament to her survival. Her transformation, the question of full reconciliation with Eleanor and Mark, became secondary, almost irrelevant. Her healing was her own journey, and she had reached its most crucial destination. Sarah's future was no longer about proving anything to anyone. It was about building, creating, and giving back. She had seen the raw face of poverty and the crushing weight of despair. Her experiences had instilled in her a profound sense of responsibility. She envisioned Phoenix Tech expanding its philanthropic arm, dedicating vast resources to mentorship programs for young, underprivileged entrepreneurs, particularly women in tech. She wanted to create opportunities for those who, like her, had been told they were not enough, to provide the spark and the support she had so desperately needed in her early days. She began to redefine what it meant to be truly wealthy and successful. It wasn't just about the balance in her bank account, but about the impact she could make, the lives she could uplift, the new legacies she could help forge. Her empire was no longer just a personal vindication. It was a platform for change, a beacon of hope for others. She dedicated herself to using her power and her resources to build a better future, one where talent was recognized regardless of background, and where resilience was celebrated above all else. Sarah Spencer, the billionaire, was finally free. Free from the shadow of betrayal, free from the golden cage of her own success, and free to embrace a future where her true wealth was measured not in dollars, but in purpose, in impact, and in the profound, unwavering peace of a soul finally at rest. Her journey had come full circle, not to reclaim an inheritance, but to forge a legacy far more meaningful and enduring than any her father could have left or her mother could have denied.